Let's take you to the National Press Club. The Foreign Affairs Minister Penny Wong addressing the club.
Today, and thank you to Jane for that introduction and for moderating the discussion today. Can I thank all of you for being here? But I do want to particularly acknowledge one of my guests today, Alan Gyngell. Alan has been an official and unofficial advisor to governments for decades, always in singular service of Australia's national interest. He is the definitive historian of Australian foreign policy. He's the finest writer about Australian foreign policy, and he is frankly the finest mind in Australian policy and foreign policy, and possibly also the smallest ego in Australian foreign policy. So thank you, Alan. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. First Nations peoples were this land's first diplomats and traders, but it was just this month that Mr Justin Mohammed commenced his appointment as Australia's inaugural Ambassador for First Nations people. Elevating First Nations perspectives will strengthen our connections across the world and in our region, especially across the Blue Pacific. And the potential power of those connections has been neglected for too long, and it has been to our own detriment, when we ought to bring everything we have to the table. Self-evidently, the first thing we bring to the table is ourselves. And as I travel, I tend to begin engagement by explaining who we are, a land that is home to the oldest continuous culture on the planet and to people from more than 300 ancestries. A nation whose people share common ground with so many of the world's peoples. When Australians look out to the world, we see ourselves reflected in it, just as the world can see itself reflected in us. What that means is we have the ability to build on common ground with people around the world. This is a powerful national asset for building alignment, for articulating our determination to see the interests of all the world's peoples upheld alongside our own. This matters because our foreign policy must be an accurate and authentic reflection of our values and our interests, of who we are and of what we want. And it matters because our national power, more than anything else, comes from our people. We need to harness all elements of our national power to advance our interests when the implications of unchecked strategic competition in our region are grave. So today, I want to talk to you about how we avert war and maintain peace. And more than that, how we shape a region that reflects our national interests and our shared regional interests. Those interests lie in a region that operates by rules, standards and norms, where a larger country does not determine the fate of a smaller country, where each country can pursue its own aspirations and its own prosperity. And I want to talk about how we contribute to the regional balance of power that keeps the peace by shaping the region we want. Strategic competition is operating on several levels, domains that we might prefer to separate, economic, diplomatic, strategic, military, all interwoven and all framed by an intense contest of narratives. But as well as understanding how competition is operating, we need to understand what is being competed for, that it is more than great power rivalry and is in fact nothing less than a contest over the way our region and our world work. Many commentators and strategists prefer to look at what is happening in the region simply in terms of great powers competing for primacy. They love a binary. And the appeal of a binary is obvious. Simple, clear choices, black and white. But viewing the future of our region simply in terms of great powers competing for primacy means countries' own national interests can fall out of focus. And it diminishes the power of each country to engage other than through the prism of a great power. It is also unhelpful to narrow this discussion to the potential for kinetic conflict on our shores when regional interests are challenged by actions that fall far short of that. Coercive trade measures, unsustainable lending, political interference, disinformation and reshaping international rules, standards and norms that have benefited smaller countries from trade to human rights, these all encroach on the ability of countries to exercise their agency and contribute to regional balance and decide their own destinies. So countries like ours in this contested region need to sharpen our focus on what our interests are and how to uphold them. And our focus must be on what we need to do so that we can live according to our own laws and values, determined by our own citizens, pursuing our own prosperity, making our own choices, and respecting but not deferring to others. Our focus needs to be on how we ensure our fate is not determined by others, how we ensure our decisions are our own. And if there were any doubt, Russia's illegal and immoral invasion of Ukraine renders stark our interest in living in a region where no country dominates and no country is dominated.